Let's roll.
This is Ian, and welcome to the Soulful Man Show. For those joining the series for the first time, we're going to be exploring the topic of how to tune into our desire to access more of our personal power. And this is a really important topic for me. So I've put together this speaker series and invited several people to discuss their own good work and the relationship with this idea of desire and personal power. So today I've got Kevin joining me, and Kevin coaches men, helping them to achieve more balance in their masculine energy and in their lives. So thanks for choosing to join us on this talk, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ian. Stoked to be here.
Sweet. You want to speak a little bit about what you're up to these days?
Yeah, well, currently I'm living for the summer in Bali, Indonesia, just on creative retreat. I'm creating a online course all about teaching flow states, anchoring personal rituals. I'm launching a retreat that's also based on these ideas using meditation, qigong, breath work, tantric practices, relating, communication to create a 5-day immersive experience around that. And yeah, I'm still seeing clients, creating content, making videos, going through my own work. And yeah, it's just had a blessed year full of events. So you caught me right in the middle of that.
Amazing. That sounds fabulous. Where are you going to be conducting these workshops?
So I might do a few here in Bali. I do a bit of DJing and ecstatic dance as well. So it's like mixing personal development with that. But the full-blown retreat I'll be leading will be in Costa Rica in October.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. Well, we could talk afterwards about the ecstatic dance portion. If you ever come out to Toronto, we'd love to host you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. It's a bit cold for my liking, but I could see it happening.
Now's a good time. There's a lot going on there. It's not like Bali, but it's beautiful.
Right.
Sweet. Well, can you talk a little bit about kind of what has brought you to this point in your journey today?
Yeah, I mean, this point in my journey is an interesting one because I spent so many years as an entrepreneur and as a coach to achieve freedom, right? Time, money, location, occupational freedom, many layers of it. And now I have all those things. And so I've freed up creative energy on a big level. And it definitely wasn't always this way, like super microdose backstory. I was born and raised in Texas and went to University of Texas in Austin and was studying law first. And then I went to psychology and philosophy. And I was pretty dead set on being like a clinical psychologist and like a Jungian analyst. I was really into like social and evolutionary psychology, and I was going to get my PhD and going down this path. And long story short, basically through heartbreak and through a lot of emotional pain and depression, and then also like light addictions through alcohol and just a shitty lifestyle, let's say.
Right.
I broke through and found Kendo, Aikido, I found yoga, meditation, and discovered really the path I'm on now, which is taking like full ownership for where I am in life and authoring my reality. Right. And that led me to California and into like academia there. And then I quit all that again and went through another cycle, and that led me to Southeast Asia, where I backpacked through. I didn't make it to Bali. This is a different season this time, but the first time I backpacked through Thailand, Malaysia, Laos. I went to India, studied yoga, studied in the Osho tradition there, and then backpacked in Nepal and returned to the States, where I started doing coaching, retreats, workshops, all around, communication first, then personal development, yoga, and then it turned into tantra, men's work, and really the techniques of ecstasy and the techniques of altered states and personal power.
Mm-hmm. The techniques of ecstasy. I love that. So, I mean, I can relate to the idea of kind of going down this path of designation, or, where you think, lies the answers. And then there's the pain of knowing that that's not so. And so when you speak about ecstasy, or this discovering something that that feels good? How did that sort of unfold for you?
I mean, the term is the archaic techniques of ecstasy is actually a term from Mircea Eliade, who's a French writer who writes about shamanism and yoga and these kind of works. And he's been picked out by a lot of the flow psychology community. And Terence McKenna was a big guy that he influenced, as well as Carl Jung. But
Mm,
just want to make that clear because he's one of my favorite authors. For me, the first one I found was writing and speaking.
hmm
So in a small group of friends, if I was public speaking or storytelling, I would enter this state of ecstatic flow state, and
hmm
then writing, like poetry first, and then writing. I wanted to be an author, and so I would just get in these crazy flow states writing, and that kind of led me towards entrepreneurship and spoken word poetry when I started to become more of an artist as well. And that was really my first one that really sank in. And then many more were discovered after that, as I started to apply myself to finding them.
hmm Okay, well, we're in dialogue right now, and I mean, I think probably not everybody can relates to the idea of being able to access some flow state when speaking. Something happens physiologically in
Right.
you where you're connecting to something, right?
Right.
It's bringing you into some core or some center place. Can you speak about that to people who might not understand? This term flow state is kind of thrown around quite a bit. What does that really mean, or what does that feel like?
Yeah. I mean, I want to shout out and direct people to the work of Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel. They're some of the only people in the field doing anything on it. They have two books, Rise of Superman and Stealing Fire, which, I mean, synchronistically, just at dinner at the gym, I was listening to the audiobook again. And I mean, there's a physiological component and there's a mystical component of the flow
Mm-hmm.
state. The physiological component is when you're engaged in something and you're excited about it and you're good at it and you feel challenged
Mm-hmm.
or there's uncertainty, you start to release all these neurochemicals. Serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin are the main ones, but you get norepinephrine, you get endorphins, you get anandamide. These are basically cocktails of chemicals that tell you keep going, you're in new territory, you don't know what's going to happen, and there's varying thresholds of pleasure and uncertainty, right? And so it's surfing that wave. And so physiologically, that's what I feel. And now I've studied the science to understand and name it and be like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's what that is. But it's a feeling, really. And Freud and the psychoanalysts called it the oceanic feeling, and you see it a lot in children in play. You see it on the basketball court, on the sports field. You see it in martial arts dojos. You see it at high stress, high pressure sales. Anything that pushes the limits, it's more likely to appear. But once you are acquainted with the feeling, you can just kind of ride it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've discovered for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, on the more mystical side, you have the woo-woo side, let's say, of like channelers and mystics and people who are speaking in tongues. And this is a very intense region of the brain. That's the right hemisphere. That's, the subconscious, subcortical areas that's being studied now as well. But, I can definitely attest, especially, I'm a freestyle hip hop artist and spoken word kind of poet. So that's when I really get into these states where
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking so fast and rhyming and telling
Mm-hmm.
a story. And then I don't even know where it's coming from.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't have told you what I was going to say, but it's
Mm-hmm.
happening. And
Right.
so it's almost like I'm watching myself do it. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm tapping into something beyond my mind.
Beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to sort of go a little bit deeper into this because it's sort of at the heart of the matters is this kind of I'm not going to be able to recite back to you all the sort of the neurochemical things that are going on when we sort of feel the high that happens when we're doing something what we're just able to gain access, whether it's speaking or writing or something physical. But it seems that there's something kind of like there could be something mediocre about it, mediocre or mundane to say, in that it could
Right.
be one thing or another. We could be doing something that could be good for us or it could be harmful for us. It could be leading us down a path that, is ultimately going to be towards our demise. How do you kind of differentiate between that, or what has, you're on your path now. What's brought you to the place where you kind of know, oh, not only does this feel good, but I know this is good. I know this is good for me. I know this sort of collaborates with an inner desire for me that, goes really deep.
Yeah, and this is worth mentioning. This is where addiction lives. Like chasing this kind of state through substances unchecked, leads to death and addiction and disabling yourself. And you know, we know this from rat studies. There's a famous rat study where they basically gave them food, mates, or a drip of pure like cocaine, basically, and the rats just took the drug until they died. Most of them, like rejecting mates or food, and just took these dopamine hits until death. So,
Yeah.
That's obviously extreme example, and it's a rat, it's not a human being. But yeah, like to answer your question, the only way I found any of this out was a lot of experimentation,
Mm-hmm.
going into anxiety, having insomnia, going into depressions, like going into the dark side of like feeling like shit and going broke and making creative ideas and presenting them and having them flop. And that is how I started to learn, like, oh, not only do I produce my best work when I feel this way, but if I just chase the feeling and don't get feedback or don't structure it, then I'm just kind of in my own world. And
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time in isolation and, really came into my own. I was a bit of a late bloomer. So I spent a lot of time in books and video games and my own fantasies before I ever was in a community being a leader.
Right.
And first thing that actually, I'm an Eagle Scout. I went through the whole, you know, gamut of Boy Scouting in Texas. So that was a blessing. It taught me a lot about this, nature, and like leadership and being in like a pseudo military organization. But that if someone doesn't know what they're good at or what they're passionate about and puts them in a flow state, it's pretty important to find out. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of your life chasing this state with alcohol, with sex, with things that don't really serve you, and you'll use your best hours not in a flow state for money, right? And this is where most people get caught in a career that they hate or a marriage they hate. And I advocate with my clients and in my content for like radical personal freedom, but
Mm-hmm.
the correlate to that is radical personal responsibility. So you're living in an age where with your smartphone you can reach millions of people and make millions of dollars doing anything. Play the game. And you can fly anywhere in the world. And, I'm acting like a global citizen right now. Like I choose to be here to create and live from because it's the best scenario and environment for what I'm trying to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Some other time that might be LA or Toronto. So it's like taking the reins and taking real responsibility for where I'm at in life. And, it took me a lot of trial and error and mentors and community that called me out and called me up and was like, Kevin, you're fucking up right now, or Kevin, like do more of that. You're really good at that. And like, I'm just blind to it because I'm looking this way because
Right.
I'm in my experience. So there's a lot of factors involved.
Hmm. So you speak of the reflections.
Yeah.
So paying attention to what, our community is saying or our friends are saying or how we're being challenged, looking outside. And so you've got this sort of like, it feels good. You're riding on the adrenaline of what you're doing. You're motivated to do several things. You're doing these things. You're paying attention to what, I guess, what the world is saying. Anything else? Like anything else, just as as an arbiter for knowingness, just for your own personal knowingness. I know that it's growing, and I see and have experienced also a degree of just kind of going down the wrong path for too long, or going after some concept that does feel good, like like the analogy of just abusing some substance.
Right.
How do we know, like where does that knowingness come from? Because the outside world can give us many reflections.
Yeah, the outside world is more of a thermos. It's like a thermometer, but you have to be the thermostat. So it'll tell you what temperature you'll get reflected, but you're setting the temperature with your actions, beliefs, thoughts, words. So yeah, there's really, and this is, you see this in plant medicine, which I've also done a lot of experimentation and study with. And you see this in like cults and yoga communities and spiritual communities where people want to stay on the mountaintop. And for me, the flow state is like the mountaintop. So you have to come back down to the village because you're living in a human world. You have bills, you have relationships to maintain, right? Like it's very grounded. And I feel like the reason I've been able to travel so far in the world and in my consciousness is because I am very grounded and was raised that way and just have always been that way, but
Mhm.
also very like experimental. So it's a good combo. I've been blessed with that. But yeah, I would say the real trick, especially if you're an entrepreneur of any kind, is to harness your flow state to make a living and to make it easy, lucrative, fun, and meaningful. So you want to have a connection to God or something beyond you, creator, whatever that means to you. And that's a really big piece because that's going to keep you motivated and humble. And then you want it to be lucrative. So if you're really good at something and puts you in a flow state and other people find value in it, then you should probably package and sell that in a way that feels good and is authentic and in integrity. And that's really say what you will about a lot of the high level people out there financially and athletics and business. Like one way or another, they're doing this. Now, some of them, the ethics are questionable, but that's what they're doing, which is why they have the success they do. And, you know, there's an art to grounding it too. So if you're getting into these states, and the Greek word is ecstasis, like ecstasis means going out of your mind. So like you're entering an ecstatic state of bliss, of purpose, of flow, of focus. I mean, think of Michael Jordan just hitting every jumper in the fourth quarter to win the game. Or think of, the stock market analyst who's seeing the numbers and he's making the right trades and he's in the zone. And in martial arts, you're in a bout and like you're down in points and you make the perfect counters like that. Those are those flow states that obviously you can't stay in them forever, but if you can learn to harness them and apply them and then have discipline when you come down from them and realize that you can get into it again tomorrow, just set
Mhm.
up the same conditions, take care of yourself, be trained, be disciplined, be humble, then you can really set up a life where you are in control of your energy and your money and your time, your relationships. And I'm no expert at this. I mean, I've only been studying it full bore for maybe like 4 years and practicing it full bore for 3. So this is like the sky is the limit here. And I think more and more in this age of information, the people who control this state within themselves are going to be the new leaders, and they already are, because you can have all the information you want on the internet now, but implementing it and practicing it in a way that actually matters to you is really the new gold.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. These are things that I'm trying to convey to my children,
All right.
which
I can
is,
only imagine.
yeah, this idea of kind of just, and maybe we just needs to go down this path of making a lot of colossal errors in our own way, however that's going to be, and starting from the worst possible place. Not that that's my situation, or mine with my children, but I think um, the idea of just starting where you want to be, like doing something that you want to do, being in a place that makes you feel good, overall in a whole way, in a wholesome way, is a good place to start from my point of view. What would you say to what would you say to a young version of yourself, or what would you say to a young man or woman who is, has all those distractions, or has all those kind of very limited, the limited scopes of what's possible? As you know, when you're starting out, you don't see all that much. You see the kind of the broad things, but not not the nitty gritty. How would you advise a younger version of you?
Yeah. I mean, I love this question. I get asked it a lot. And for the record, I'm 29, so I still feel very young, but also I feel, for what it's worth, like experienced in this because I had to learn the hard way and I put
Hmm.
in a lot of hours just putting my mind to this. I would definitely tell a younger version of myself just to take way more risks. I made so many errors, I would say, looking back, hindsight's 2020, of just not taking enough risks because I was way too calculated.
Mm-hmm.
And which served me in the long run because it really like protected me against loss, but it also prevented me from like tapping into what I've tapped into now, because
Mm-hmm.
life kind of forced me to take the risks, whether that was a breakup or like getting miserable in a job or just being in some kind of situation that I had to change because I knew I needed to change it, but I waited to the last minute. So
Right.
it's really like take the risk sooner. And also, I wish I had found mentors and a community sooner
Mm-hmm.
and paid for access to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, like, you can do it all on your own, but it's going to be way harder and it's going to be way less fun. And some things you can never do on your own. So really, it's about paying to get access to someone who's already where you want to be years in the future, and just be around them, study them, ask them good questions. I was blessed to be immersed in so many epic communities and still am. Like even here where I am, I'm just surrounded by mind-blowing venture capitalists and healers and coaches. And it's like the norm now for me. But
Right.
at one point I thought I could do it all by myself in my
Yeah.
room with my laptop, and
Mm,
it's
yeah.
just not the case.
That's a good one. I like that. I feel like I discovered dance later on. I also feel young, by the way. I still feel very young, and I'm 50, almost going to be 51. And I wish I had discovered dance. I wish I had discovered moving for myself at the age my son is now, which is 18, because I know I was looking for it. I know I was looking for it, or just
Right.
some community that was meaningful for me at that time, rather than the other things that I was involved in. So I like that.
Right.
Searching for support and community and leadership and mentoring, and be willing to actually pay for it.
Yeah, it's one of the best investments you can make as a 20-year-old, even 18-year-old out of college or out of high school. Like, it's very valuable. Like, forget the car and all the amenities. Like, that's going to come as you get into your career. You're going to have that no matter what,
Yeah,
if you do the basic stuff. But some people, I see this all the time in coaching and sales. It's like, it's hard for us to realize where we're going to be in the future. And so it's even harder to justify spending money on that, especially if we're operating from there's not enough. And it's one of those paradoxes that you have to experience on your own.
totally. Um, so in your work with people, and just in terms of what you see, but what do you see as being the thing that's, I mean, you mentioned the idea of taking risks, and I know a lot of risk takers that have gone down, that have gone down a path that have also not led them to um, happiness, that have not led them to a place of contentment, or led them to a place of bounty. That's really a big thing. Like you say, there's just a lot of feeling of scarcity, and this idea of bounty, I feel, is connected with with something specific. What do you feel gets in the way of people to kind of access this? I call it like I guess in terms of your flow state, like it can happen in an action. It can happen over the course of an afternoon or in an hour or in this talk. And then there's it happening in our lives. Like, wow, I've been in this like 3-year flow state, where I'm just kind of like moving with the flow of everything that's going on in my life. What gets in the way of people from accessing that?
I mean, the number one thing is definitely like ourselves. Like, we get in the way, in that it's the classic, what you're good at on some level. You know what you love to do, at least a little bit. And what kind of, most people know what their dream is. Like, they don't have trouble talking about their dream. But then you ask them, why aren't you already doing it? Or what steps are you going to take to actualize that dream? And they get into their head, and it's all these excuses. Or like, well, once I have the car, or once I sell the house, then
Mm-hmm.
I could start this. Or like, well, once I find the right girl, or once I get divorced. There's all these like games we're playing with ourselves. And you know I still play them with myself, just at a different octave now. And it's like, it's just part of being human. It's part of our brain that was evolved to protect us from getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers and finding food and water. And so it's really hard to mitigate risk because of like the brain's neurotic nature. That's why getting out of the brain is so important through these ecstatic states and through your flow, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, the number one thing that like always brings me back, and you know, I've been with, it's been a while, but I have been with the elderly. Like if you go to a nursing home or you go to a hospice or people on their deathbed, they never regret the mistakes they made. They don't tell you about that because they're at peace with it. They
Mm-hmm.
regret what they never even attempted. They
Mm-hmm.
regret never proposing to that one man
Mm-hmm.
or woman. They never regret, you know, fucking up a bunch of times and having
Yeah.
fun and making mistakes. It's like life is too short, especially in this age. It's the best time to be alive. We have infinite access to money, to investment, to capital, to marketing through social media and Google, and just the world is your oyster if you like really engage it in that way. But a lot of people are still living their parents' lives or their parents' lives, you know, and that's something that everyone has to face in their own way and really come clean with their desire. It's about owning desire. And it's not worth going to the grave with desire unlived, as long as you're not hurting anyone and you're putting it towards value and service to humanity. Like, let it rip. Like we all need each other's gifts. So it's like there's a way that like when you withhold your gifts, the universe withholds its gifts to you in the
Mm-hmm.
form of money, energy, and time and love. And it's really it's natural law. I'm a big student of natural law. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
law of equivalent exchange or law of reciprocity, whatever you want to call it.
Well said. Well said. Um, yeah, I feel that this fear is the fear of not knowing and not knowing even necessarily who we are and not having had that modeled and not yeah. And so I feel that the risk taking here, the risk taking is in learning to discover what that is and learning to be able to reveal what you don't know or what we don't know or where we, you know, where we are not, where we are that we don't like, we don't want to be, how we want things sort of different. Um, and starting from that place of, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going
But
on here, that I feel people are not willing to do or is
sure,
difficult to do.
it's certainly difficult because if you think you have it all figured out, it's going to be really hard to submit to unknown information. And that's really where, like, you know, ecstatic dance and trance and meditation and breath work, these are all great ways to just enter a surrendered state physiologically, where you can get past a lot of these issues and just kind of receive and just be surprised and in curiosity like a child or an animal.
Mm.
And this is what all the Eastern philosophies and religions are about. And in the West, it's been more about science and technology, which is amazing. But we're getting to a point where you have to synthesize both to know how to use the tools we've made, or to know how to live in the career you've created. Because what can give freedom can also become a prison if you're unable to integrate and appreciate it and really like see it with new eyes.
Yeah, you really inspire the idea that you know, like an augmentation of consciousness is kind of required, is being called is being called forward to be able to deal with all of what is available today. Otherwise, lest we get lost in it completely, that it's powerful and it, you know, it's extremely versatile and gives us unlimited possibilities, and yet it seems to be oppressive and it seems to be misleading, and unless it's used properly. It's both a power and, you know, and it keeps us enslaved.
Sure.
And let's say for those who are, you know, who those, you know, of us who are feeling a little bit more perhaps lost on our path, like more deeply lost. Um, maybe in the realm of substance abuse, or maybe in the realm of some type of abuse or self-neglect of some kind. How would what would be your words to kind of guide those people back to, a place of more knowing? Just the kind of the beginning steps, how to get started.
Yeah. I mean, having been there myself, at least to some extent, definitely not at the extent I've seen some people, but you really have to start with honesty, because the way you talk to yourself and the way you think, like your self-talk in your mind, is like ground zero. So it's like, until you start telling the truth to yourself, let alone the people in your community, it's going to be really hard to actually shift. And this is why, like the 12-step program, for example, with, alcoholics, is so effective, is because you have accountability in a community, and there's a big aspect of truth telling. And
Uh-huh.
Jordan Peterson, who's just, the man right now, he talks a lot about this. Just like, stop saying things that aren't true. And he's nailing it on the head. That's first principles. Then you're going to have to reclaim your energy. So for most people, it starts with the body. Like, you can't get too grandiose. Like, are you drinking enough water? Are you eating foods that support health and medicine for you? Are you sleeping well? Like, it's like, it starts there. And that's why I think, for me, martial arts and yoga were a combo that I stumbled across, having played football and soccer and done weightlifting, but none of those had the mindfulness aspect. And so that was a huge breakthrough for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I followed the yoga path all the way to India, and it just was radical for me. And so it's really getting a practice, whether it's as simple as sitting in the morning and drinking your tea, or if it's going to, 2 hours of Ashtanga Vinyasa, or going to hot yoga, or going to your local MMA gym. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to take back your body
Mm-hmm.
and start there.
Mm-hmm.
It's different for men and women. For women, you might find it more through community or through expressions of love and relating. I think the
Right.
female naturally is better at that, across like all things being equal. And for men, you're going to have to get like quiet and still and
Mm-hmm.
be alone, as well as with brothers. And just, you have to wait for inspiration and really dive deep, because if you keep acting from the manic action and what you think you need to do, you'll actually just pile dirt on top of yourself. So there's a part of the journey, if you really feel lost, where you just have to stop, like stop digging the hole and sit. And like, you will be called to right action. It might take a while, especially if you've dug a deep hole for yourself. And then you
Yeah.
ask for help.
Yeah.
Ask for help is the big one.
So starting with the idea that, and I like the way this was put, and I don't know who quoted it, but um, we fucked ourselves up. Only we can unfuck ourselves. And just
Right.
in terms of that self-talk, or what we're telling ourselves to be where we are, and begin telling the truth um, within our own minds. And then this idea of self-care, I think, people like throw it around again, like self-care, this idea of giving ourselves what we need, like really just taking care of ourselves, starting with a glass of water, or food that is good for us, or just some quiet space, to stop the cycle of self-abuse. That can be any number of different things, ignoring our needs to begin with, and then all the stuff that can happen as a result. Yeah. And even in the martial arts or things like that, I think, anything that we do could be a way of neglecting ourselves or abusing ourselves. So doing it in a way that, I like the way you put it, just is basic to our own needs and to our own desires and our own wants, whatever that happens to be. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah. So that's starting points.
That's sage advice. Cool. Well, my last question is, here you are at the age of 29 and doing what you're doing. What kind of keeps you in the core of your inspiration, where you really feel juicy, and you're developing and you're at your growing edge?
Yeah, this year has been a test for that because I plateaued after really like getting a lot of epic connections and success with clients and exposure on social media, you know, hit multiple plateaus. And the thing that gets me most inspired is the age we're living in. And like when I really tap in, and you're like for example, last night there's a big festival happening here, which I'm speaking at this weekend, called the New Earth Festival, and like all the Balinese and Indonesian royalty are here, the royal families and the
Hmm.
priests, and it's just like it's this whole thing. Like all of Indonesia is like here right now,
Right.
and there's the world is huge and it's shifting really fast, and it can be hard to see from just our small vantage point wherever we live, and from our screen when we're looking at news and Google and Facebook and Instagram. But the world is changing at a crazed pace, especially if you study history, because if you go back even 100 years, if you think about the year 1919, we're talking about orders of magnitude in the speed of the rate of the change through technology, through pharmacology, through mindfulness and consciousness and the revolution that's happening. So when I tap into that feeling, and I can only get there if I'm really like in a deep trance meditation breath work, or if I'm talking to powerful people and just really like being empathetic and empathing them, that's what like wipes away any doubt or stress, or and it's returning to gratitude and returning to feeling the mission of humanity, which
Hmm.
is self-expression and connection to the earth and to each other and creating heaven on earth. I really believe that the next golden age is dawning right now. And that's why things seem so fucked up if you watch the news, because the powers that be, the forces, good and evil, whatever you want to call it on the planet, know this. And it's happening right now. Like if you're alive right now, you have a front row seat on the next, like we went from hunter gatherer to agrarian to industrial, and we're making the fourth shift right now. We're making the next phase shift in human civilization right now. Like to me, there's nothing more inspiring than that.
Let's just let that resonate for a second. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I love hearing that. that that really that really does resonate with me, and I do feel the truth in that. I do feel the truth in that, in my own life, and in the lives of many around me, and I see the darkness too, and I think that a lot of people might hear that and feel that that's bullshit, or that's not so, or well, that's true for you, and I feel that
Sure.
because it is true for you, and because you do see that, and if you open your eyes and you do hear others speaking the same thing, that it is therefore true and possible, even if it's been true and possible all along, which it probably has been, but it seems more than ever that it is now, and that's those are beautiful words and beautiful reflections, and I want to thank you for offering up all that, Kevin. You seem like you're in a you're in an awesome place, both physically and personally and spiritually. I'm just looking out over the back of your shoulder, and I just want to be there. There's some construction going on in the back over here, here in Montreal, Canada, but definitely got to make it out to Bali one of these days. Damn.
It's a spot I would highly recommend it. It's called the Island of the Gods. It's just a really unique place, and it's a hub for digital nomads and expats from the West. So you'll actually be right at home. It's not
Right.
it's not it's not a rough living. It's quite beautiful.
That's what I've heard. Sweet. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap this up for today, Kevin. And I know you know you have you've got a gift that you're beautifully offering everybody that's listening today, and maybe you can tell people a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so I have it's an ebook. It's about 20 pages, like a quick start guide, just very basic stuff, but a lot of what I've talked about, like where to start. It's called Seven Pathways to Reclaiming Primal Wellness. And, primal in that, it's the basics: how to meditate, how to eat, how to sleep, how to hydrate, how to do gratitude, how to journal about your thoughts. And it seems silly, especially if you've been in personal development for a while, but you got to ask yourself, as I did, am I actually doing these things every day? If the
Mm.
answer is no, then do that first, then revisit your so-called problems. And you'll find that many of them are already solved, and the creative solutions to the rest of them will appear.
All right, great. Wow, that's really generous of you. Thank you so much. Um, so there is a button on this page that everybody can click to download this gift. And Kevin, I really want to thank you again for joining me today. It was awesome talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Ian. It's a great conversation. And, shout out to all the people tuning in to your work, because you're bringing together a lot of epic people.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you. And everyone that's watching, I want to thank you all. And I'm going to be here again tomorrow and in discussion with Rob Kinnell. So bye for now.